I don't think you should hit the record button when you say, "How are you guys doing?" Because you never know how that goes.
What? That's why I do it. I gotta record to get, and I can always take it out. But what if it's gold? What if the how you're doing? What if that's like, something genius?
What if the how you doing is gold?
Yeah, the response to the how you doing.
Andy, what is actually gold is Andy's little house here.
Oh, there you go. What is gold?
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about that.
Hey guys, one of the things that I've listened to recently that is kind of related to Bitcoin, but not about Bitcoin, is Radio Lab.
I love Radio Lab.
Episode about how money works. It's called Radio Lab. It was from a couple months ago. More money, more problems, and definitely worth listening to. And if you listen to that in the context of what's happening with Bitcoin, it's like, oh, this makes a lot of sense.
I love Radio Lab, and I know what you're saying, and I've come to terms with the fact that I did not buy Bitcoin early on.
And still, wait. You are continuing to refuse to buy Bitcoin early on.
Well, I bought 0.00005 Bitcoin through whatchamacallit, Robinhood.
There you go. You bought. Well, how much is that in dollars?
That was about $20.
Oh, so you probably have about $60.
No. I think I have $20.00001.
Oh,
because that was like 2 weeks ago that I bought it.
Oh, that's a problem there. No, but still early. Still, you'll be glad you bought $20 when you did in 5 years.
Unless you put it right into GameStop.
Well, maybe. Well, then I'm going to buy more into GameStop, right? But the reason I've come to terms with it is because I figure had I bought it early on, I probably would have spent it on like a pizza or something. Right. And then that pizza would have now cost me millions of dollars. And that alone would have been worse.
Another way to look at it is anyone like myself that has Bitcoin now realizes we lost tens of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, having sold big chunks of it a long time ago.
Exactly.
So we've lost in our minds a lot more than you think you've lost.
Exactly. Yeah, for me, it's just a theoretical loss.
I mean, my brother got in so early, he paid for computer equipment using thousands of Bitcoin.
Oh, an empire.
Yeah, he got into mining when you could get into mining because no one was into mining yet. And he was so pleased with himself that he paid for all the computers he used for mining.
That's what I'm talking
using
about.
Bitcoin, and he was even back in 2011. And now he's a little bummed about how much of that he sold.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Especially as a computer is a declining asset.
Right.
The minute you buy it, it's already worth half its value. It's worse than cars.
By the way, we should save it for the podcast, right?
No, this is it. We're podcasting.
No, this is the podcast.
Oh, we are?
Oh, sure.
This is
good stuff. Right. But the levels of regret, I think, is an interesting topic.
Yeah, there's levels of regret.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Andy, how you doing, man? What are you up to these days? Are you retired?
No, I have a job with Harvard University working on software for their alumni organization, and I code software for the alumni portal to build community and mine data and then ask really rich people for lots of money.
So
that's the gist of my job.
Can we just, for people who haven't followed this podcast and are just hopping on because NFTs are such a hot thing right now, can you just describe your Bitcoin and your blockchain history?
Oh, okay. So before working at Harvard, I worked at a failed Bitcoin startup wherein the intellectual property that we had created got distributed among some people that had different ideas for what to do than we did. And so then the company went under and like back in the end of 2015. But Bitcoin at no point during our company's tenure was uninvented. So even though the company went under, my brother who founded it and myself and other folks who work for the company, as far as like working for a failed startup goes, we're all doing better than average.
Yeah, I'll say. So Andy is joining us today, and we are going to be talking about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and of course, my co-host, senior strategist Glenn Gruber, joins us.
Hey there. So Andy, this is you're one of our few repeat guests, because I remember we did the thing because you were at Bitcoin Armory.
Yeah,
if
that
I
was
recall correctly.
It was Bitcoin Armory, and it's still an open source project.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
I think Andy's our most frequent guest at this point. I think he's
at two. At two appearances.
I thought you were three. I thought this is your third time.
You're right.
No, it's okay. It's actually 2 appearances may still be our most frequent guest. Like
the number of
possible.
opportunities I missed to buy Bitcoin. That's what that number represents. So NFT WTF is the potential title for this podcast. Yeah. And welcome to the Modern Digital Enterprise, the digital transformation podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet podcast network. We are going to talk about somehow if NFTs have any application in the enterprise, I hope, because that's what we need to do on this.
You always tie it back to enterprise.
We got to do it. Yeah. Or people complain. We'll get letters. Okay. So let's just start right off here. Non-fungible tokens started out in 2017, even though I feel like I just heard about them a month ago. Or NFTs are cryptographic assets, the ownership of which is tracked on a blockchain via unique identification codes and metadata that distinguish them from each other. Unlike cryptocurrencies, they themselves cannot be traded or exchanged at equivalency. This differs from fungible tokens like cryptocurrencies, which are identical to each other and therefore can be used as a medium for commercial transactions. So NFTs is it's really just like a digital payment at its most fundamental level, right?
Andy, you should probably tell us what the answer is, but I thought that the whole idea behind an NFT, that it actually has nothing to do with payment. It is just a registration of an asset using a distributed ledger. So unlike your deed, which is with the state or something like that, there's a third party who is the single nexus of control to say who owns this property. This uses the same blockchain distributed ledger technology as cryptocurrency, but represents ownership to an asset, mostly digital, but could be physical as well. Did I get that right?
Sounds about right. That the idea that any kind of registration on a blockchain is connected to a physical asset requires on some central authority recognizing that. So I always feel like you still have to have someone to say, yeah, that means you own it. I don't know how useful that is, but I see lots of people trying to make something like that work. I don't know. I think what's exciting about NFTs is that it provides a way for owners of NFTs to experience all of the bragging rights without any of the touching of the thing.
Yeah, no touching at all.
You just brag about it, and you don't actually have to get protection.
You don't have to store it or insure it.
Any physical security.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. But it's a great distinction, too, because it really actually has nothing to do with the money, even though there's so much money being generated here or wasted, as the case may be. And it's really just a registration of ownership, right? Proof of ownership, right? Because these things could be free. You could give something away. In fact, we'll get into it. What's the dude's name? Beeple had a special where he was giving art away for $1 a piece, and then people immediately flipped them for like thousands of dollars. So right. So it's not really about the money. The money is just kind of a side.
Yeah. And by the way, when you said before that, it's been around since 2017, but you just heard of it last month. That's because this Beeple guy, who I always thought was like a pseudonym. I don't know if it's his real name or whatever.
Is his real name.
But
Matt Winkleman.
Okay.
Yeah, I go by Winkleman.
More right. But because he sold one of his paintings as an NFT for $69 million. And I think that is, if not one of the largest transactions for an NFT. And all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, wait, what's
that? Feels a bit high.
Yeah, I think it was 66 million.
It does.
No, wait, no.
It's 69.2.
70 million. Oh, because Christie's. All right, so I got the whole Winkleman story right here. So Beeple had been he became a graphic artist, and he was doing a drawing a day at couple of years ago. And he was giving them away. And then in November 2020, he sold his first NFT, which was that Trump animation. I don't know if you saw that, but there'll be a link in the notes to the podcast. And it's a Trump animation it's like a 3D animation with music, and it's good. And he sold that for $66.6 thousand. And then in December, a month later, he thought that was a lot, $66.6 thousand. And then a month later, in one day, he sold $3.5 million of his art. In one day. And then Crossroads, which was the name of the Trump animation, resold for $6.6 million. And people got 10% of that. So he made another 600 grand off of that graphic. And then more recently, Christie's auction house sold a giant a montage of 5,000 Beeple images in one image. And that sold for nearly $70 million.
So two things on that. So number one is the repetition of 666 for a Trump image.
Ooh,
is that coincidence?
A lot of sixes. I don't know. You're right.
Yeah, but so kudos to him if you have thought of that. But the other thing that I think is really interesting, though, about the NFT concept is that this basically does use smart contracts that are often used, in blockchain style agreements. And this could maybe lead us at some point into an enterprise kind of discussion. But because like Ethereum has a lot of business rules and so on and so forth. But the ability to write into the contract of the NFT that if it gets resold, that the originator can get a cut of that resale continues to provide ongoing value to the creator of whatever that good is. And I do know that, I believe that, I think it was the NFL. I remember reading, because I follow sports maybe more than technology, but that's another discussion. That I thought that the NFL was looking at using NFTs for ticket sales, because that would allow them to get a cut at all the secondary market. So when someone has their season tickets and then for the playoffs they resell it for 10 times what that original ticket was, then the NFL gets to make even more money, because God forbid, with their $100 billion contract, that they feel that they're running out of cash. But it's an interesting thing that if you're a creator of a good, that you get to stay in the game, as opposed to today, if an artist draws creates a picture and they sell it, that's usually the end of the story for them. And over time they don't get any of the appreciation. And potentially for their kids, you could write that in that as this goes down in the will to the next generation, they can continue to enjoy the fruits of that, unless someone realizes that, oh, this wasn't all that
This was
valuable
just
in
a
the
big
first place.
scam. Yeah, but sure, in perpetuity, right? I mean, yeah, that's pretty,
Yeah.
and that's another great. I hadn't thought about that either. That's awesome. And I think one of the marketplaces that's doing that already is OpenSea.io, which claims to be the world's largest digital marketplace for crypto collectibles and NFTs, including something called ERC 721 and ERC 1155. Did you guys happen to look those up? And I forgot to look those up. I don't know what those are.
ERC.
I don't know what those.
What
Go
does
ahead, Andy.
ERC
Sorry.
mean? What is ERC? What do those letters?
It looks like ERC 721 is a non-fungible token standard on Ethereum. A lot of these run on the Ethereum. I don't know why,
Yeah,
but
well, because they do have the the rules engine smart contract model built in. Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's one of the strengths of Ethereum as a business platform. Is that so? I think it's not surprising that that's an Ethereum thing. But I was listening to a podcast from A16Z the other day, and they were referencing another ERC, but I think that was for the ERC20 token, which is the same as the B20 token. I'm presuming that those are two different versions of the same idea, but that basically it's fractionalizing. The B20 or the ERC20 is a fungible token, and because they got into the whole thing, which maybe we could talk about later, which is you could actually have an EFT, which is a singular entity, but then that can be fractionalized into ownership, which are then fungible tokens where you can have a portion of, you can have part ownership of that one thing. So that one thing is inviolable. But now I can trade that to many people so that my 5% ownership of,
sure.
The people, picture is, I can now sell that to someone else, as a fungible token, because 5% of, it's just a percentage. It's like back to
Just
currency.
sure, just like you
sort.
can buy 1% of a Bitcoin. But I don't understand why is restricted to Ethereum when it would be. It seems like it would be beneficial to just accept any cryptocurrency. Is it just the complexity of it? Maybe.
I am wondering whether or not I'm not sure what the R is, but if it's an Ethereum something contract, like maybe that's the name of their standards for all their smart contract capabilities. Now I feel like, I'm an idiot because I don't know the answer to that question, but
I think when it comes to understanding Ethereum, that to me is one of the drawbacks of it. Is it doesn't take long of looking at Ethereum to feel like an idiot. One thing about Bitcoin is it's also pretty complex under the hood, but it is understandable if you you could really get to know how Bitcoin works in maybe I would say some fraction of the time it would take to really understand how Ethereum works, because they packed too much into all the the way the smart contracts work. It's all mixed in with their security layer.
Oh.
And Bitcoin very consciously restricts how its basic level of transaction language works to construct only the most basic contracts with a lot of effort. because it's easy to prove it's correct. And one of the things that happened with Ethereum is that a lot of folks would put together these smart contracts, and then they had bugs and it didn't work, and people got screwed out of a lot of money. And they said, well, it's not Ethereum. The contract was broken. And I was like, because it was built on this really complex system that not everybody understands fully and leaves a lot of room for shenanigans. So, and then there's gas. So it's hard to wrap your head around all the Ethereum stuff. So I tend to avoid Ethereum.
Well, that's a really interesting point when it comes to the durability of these NFTs, whether that could be affected, or whether the complexity is gonna somehow affect these as well at some point.
I think what's really the future of all this is going to be, there's going to be some really exciting work done with NFTs on say Ethereum, on the other one, what was it, the Cloud network, or what was that called? BitCloud.
BitCloud.
Yeah, on that blockchain there. Like, they'll do some really interesting work, but ultimately, as it would approach the network effect that would actually, make it like really useful, like more than a toy or more than an experiment, like something that is ubiquitous that your mom knows about. Before you get to that point, you're going to hit an issue with scaling because it's all going on this blockchain, and it doesn't have the support of a whole protocol stack underneath it. And what is happening with Bitcoin is building out this protocol stack where you have Bitcoin at layer 1 and now Lightning Network at layer 2, and both of those are still at beta. And there's a lot of work happening on those, but ultimately, once you get functioning layer 2 that people accept and use and trust, then you've got like a services layer that could be built on that, where all of the fancier contracts could happen, and people could implement a structure for having NFTs that would scale. And then on that, you would build an application which would actually respect the ownership of each NFT. And if that application became ubiquitous, such that your mom used it, now your NFT dictates whether or not you can make money off of this intellectual property that is registered to your ownership, and in an application built on a protocol stack that supports the kind of network effect that would make it useful, where you can trust the everyone says, oh yeah, that's so and so's work that was on this platform that was built on Bitcoin, and so now we trust it and use it, and geez, I'm going to create something and put it on this platform, and then I'll make money the way this other guy's making money, because then it'll be everywhere. So.
But isn't that what's happening with this whole smart contracts layer? Why Ethereum has value in this space is that, like, the hard work of authenticating it as a non-fungible token, on the blockchain, that's the hard work. But now having the platform to be able to resell, all of that without having to, eventually you have to transfer the ownership, but you don't have to do the creation of the NFT itself, anymore. Like I think that is that abstraction, that service layer. That's what's going on here. What we're seeing with like a company like Top Shot, which is, again, sports, the business that the guys are doing with the NBA, for taking these moments, these short videos of specific plays, turning those into NFTs, and then now you can buy and sell them freely, but at the services layer.
Here's my take on that, right? All of that is tied into the Ethereum network, which currently is still operating as a proof of work, right? Blockchain with proof of work, which won't scale to what you need for this to be ubiquitous. So they're in the process of fixing that by switching to a proof of stake model, which has never actually been shown to work as an economic model supporting a blockchain, and whether or not that'll work is yet to be seen. I have my doubts because I feel like if it would work, we'd see evidence of it by now, because it's not the first proof of stake system out there. I mean, they're moving towards it with billions of capital. So we'll see if that works, but that's the only way that's the only option they have for scaling this system.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I still believe in aliens, but we haven't seen proof of that yet, either, but I still think that they're there. But secondly,
you have billions of dollars in capital invested in your belief.
Well, you know what they say about, more money, more problems. But Andy, actually, for myself, Steve, and everyone who's listening, can you just talk a little bit, like describe what the difference of proof of work versus proof of stake is? Because idea. I think I've heard that in different conversations, but I'm not sure that everyone knows what that means.
So proof of work is a core piece of the invention that is Bitcoin, which is kind of why it works as proof of work. It's because it's a public ledger, right? And everyone has a chance to add the next block onto this ledger, which makes it a blockchain, which the term came after the invention of Bitcoin, which is interesting. But it describes it perfectly because it is a cryptographically connected chain of blocks, and each block is provable to be the next block in the chain, and that provable nature comes from proof of work. Because the only way that you can add data, a block of data, to the blockchain is if you hash that data and get a phenomenally low number. Like, you have to get it leading zeros. Imagine you pick a random 100-digit number, and the first 12 digits in that number are zero. That's the gist of what you have to, that's the tiny hoop you have to jump through to get your validation of the last block of transactions on to the blockchain.
You have to like calculate that number. That's the mining process, right?
That's the mining process, but it's not like a number you calculate. You basically buy a lottery ticket. But the faster your computer is, the quicker you can get these lottery tickets together, because you're basically hashing all the data. If you understand hashing, you're basically taking all the data and deterministically boiling it down to one number. And everyone's following the same rules for that, right? And so everyone takes all the data, boils it down to one number. Is it low enough? No, try again. A trillion times a second. And that's how you prove work, right? You have to burn a lot of energy and use high-end computers to even compete in this game of buying cryptographic lottery tickets. And that's proof of work. Proof of stake requires a lot less energy, a lot less effort on behalf of the people who are competing, because basically they just have to own a lot of Ethereum, if that's the proof of stake on Ethereum where they're headed, or whatever your proof of stake cryptocurrency is. The more you own, the more likely it is that you'll get to place the next block in the blockchain, and then of course the more motivated you will be to actually prove that it's true, because if it's not provably true and there's shenanigans and the like, then the value of your stake will go down, presumably, as people don't trust the chain you're on. Sounds like it should work. Things haven't seen it work yet.
So,
really.
So it sounds a lot like what you're describing is the same sort of income disparity
Oh
like
God,
that
yeah.
that happens in the world generally today. But
Yeah,
I
well, I
wouldn't
mean, when
go
it comes
again
to
too far down that
mining,
political
you
rabbit hole. But
still
yeah,
you know, it's not enough just to own a big stake. You also got to do a lot of work.
no, that's what I'm saying. But if we moved to proof
Yeah.
of stake, then instead
Yeah.
of proof of work, then the more that you have, the more power that you have. Essentially, that will create an ever widening gap between the haves and the
Yeah,
have-nots in that world. It
yeah,
sounds
I
like.
don't. Here's the thing. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. We don't really know yet.
And
Well, the fat cats usually say it's,
Oh
oh, it's
yeah, of
perfectly
course.
fine. It's capitalism at work. It's a.
and
But
so
never
where
mind.
we were talking about, Bitcoin, obviously now it's at whatever 58,000 or something, and if you bought a pizza with it, 2 years ago, you'd be miserable. But like, how does that also play in with the purchasing of NFTs via Ethereum? So like, if you're spending Ethereum to buy stuff, if Ethereum goes up or goes down, maybe, with the popularity of NFTs, let's say Ethereum goes up, then does that make your NFT more valuable? Or like, the whole thing just seems very flexible in that way.
Well, it seems like with these NFTs and the astronomical numbers on some of them, there's a huge premium on fame and notoriety and perceived value. And there's also a perception of how this could be used in the future. And I did want to add one other thing about these NFTs. Even if you don't believe in Ethereum and you buy an NFT on Ethereum, right? One of the potential uses of a third layer in Bitcoin is an exchange layer, wherein an NFT on Ethereum could be of value with an exchange layer on Bitcoin. So you could be using NFTs on any other blockchain on an application built on Bitcoin.
Okay. That's what I was wondering earlier.
So you don't have to believe in Ethereum to believe in the value of a particular NFT. You just have to believe in its popularity and that, it's still going to be relevant in a future where, there's a platform that would allow you to take advantage of your ownership of this intellectual property.
That's great. So I'm going to quote a YouTube commenter who
That's
this is
dangerous.
this was on the Beeple animation. I think somebody had it on YouTube, the Crossroads, and somebody said, "Fun fact for artists, there aren't any background checks to make sure an NFT seller is the creator. The market is new and it's a free-for-all. The only real background check for NFTs right now is the check to make sure there isn't a duplicate NFT on the market.
Mm-hmm.
This means that if you want to make an NFT with your art, you have to do it hoping that an art thief hasn't already made one of yours. If you want to take down an NFT yourself, you're going to need a lot of lawyers to sue them, because not only are NFTs such a new thing that the lawyer you actually can afford won't be trained in it, but the person who sold your work for big cash / crypto now has more than enough money to fight you in court. Not only are NFTs unregulated environmentally, they suck in every way possible for small artists with no recognition."
Well, there is a future wherein that is solved.
Yeah, sure.
I would say the application that solves that in the future is called an oracle. And as an application, an oracle could be a marketplace of authenticators that says, yes, you did in fact create it, and I have verified it, and I assign my reputation to back that you did in fact create that, and I now, if you want to put my label of authority as an oracle of who created what on it, it'll cost you 0.1%.
Yeah, but
and
now
then you carry another what could be an NFT saying, hey, this has been signed by me, saying, yes, you did create this, and everyone trusts me.
So now we're back to a central authority.
But it's a central authority with an open market.
Yeah.
You can shop for your authority. You don't have to trust Visa and MasterCard just to say that this actual transaction went through. You could trust an art expert to say that you created this piece of art, and that art expert is well known. So then you carry their certification is the word I should have been using. Their certification that you did in fact create this.
And then that goes on the blockchain.
So
yeah.
So actually, I read this early this morning, so I'm going to kind of repeat this little story here. So it's an article on The Athletic by Michael Lombardi, used to be a GM for the Browns, for the Raiders. But he starts his article in terms of like, wishful thinking. And, it says, throughout the early 20th century, Dr. Abraham Breedis, probably mispronouncing the name, spent his entire life collecting and studying every small detail about famous Dutch artists' paintings, especially Vermeer. Dr. Breedis was nicknamed the Pope for his authoritative opinions when reviewing and authenticating Vermeer's work. In the late 1930s, a lawyer called upon Dr. Breedis to verify an unknown Vermeer painting. There was a lot of pressure on him to get this correct. Breedis got emotional looking at the painting and declared with certainty that this painting was authentic. He called it the masterpiece of Johannes Vermeer of Delft. The art world took it as a fact, since Breedis was the connoisseur. Several years later, Dr. Breedis was proven wrong. The painting was a fake. So how could someone, how could this happen? How could someone so well-versed, an expert in his field, get conned? It's simple. The powers of wishful thinking. Dr. Breedis wanted it to be a Vermeer more than he wanted it to be correct. So if you do have these things, as soon as you start telling this story, like I was like, oh, I read this perfect quote this morning. If you have, some sort of group or individual who is the determination of whether or not something is authentic or not, like it may not always be correct. And a lot of this NFT is all about collectibles and things of that nature. And, even at, you go to like a baseball card show and, type of thing. There's, certificates of authenticity, which maybe 9 times out of 10 are, not real. So if you do create it as an NFT based on this faulty proof of authenticity, you're just saying that it is the thing. This gives people maybe more comfort that it's correct, even though the underlying premise may not be.
Well, here's the thing about that. One, with this kind of oracle system that's there to certify facts and things, like you created this, or maybe the Boston Celtics won last night, and you have this oracle certifying facts. There's a record of every single fact that has been certified by this entity, and it in the case of this Vermeer, I think the person who is authenticating other artwork, if they got Vermeer wrong, well, then their value in that area will go down, and it would be a public record that they got that wrong, because it was later found to be wrong, and that would be knowable by the consumer of this certification. So no, you're not going to be right all the time, but kind of like when you get in an Uber, you kind of trust it because they got a pretty high rating. And boy, if you get dropped off at the wrong Thai restaurant like I was, and then you're furious and you give the guy a bad rating, you're going to save the next person from the mistake of getting in this guy's restaurant, in this guy's Uber.
So initially what I kind of envision is a market of false authenticators, right? Who might take advantage before there's enough of a record of bad authentications that take them down, where they might just jump in to make some money right away and just start authenticating everything.
And it actually, like, to that YouTuber's comment, um, I think that it does show that it could be troublesome if you're going backwards in time, to create an NFT for something that you did 10 years ago. But if you, create your new drawing, whatever, piece of music, whatever, and make that an NFT before you've released it to the public, then at least you have some control. So, like a lot of technologies, it's much easier to chart a path forward than it is back.
Yeah. And another thing to consider with all of the stuff we're talking about, none of it is of any use until it becomes ubiquitous. If your mom doesn't know about it, then you're just playing with a toy, you're trying out some new tech. But until that hits mainstream, the actual functionality of this, the usefulness of it, will seem imaginary. And then all of a sudden it'll be real. And you're like, I should have gotten those NFTs when they were cheaper.
I should have bought that Elon Musk tweet when it was just $10,000.
Yeah. So it's actually, it's another interesting issue, again, when we're looking at it from the consumer side of things, of how do you apportion value to these things? Because even if you own Twitter's first tweet, I think someone paid $2.5 million for that.
I got that here.
Maybe it was Musk, but who knows?
Yeah, Jack Dorsey, his first CEO of Twitter, his first tweet, $2.5 million.
Right. So, but that tweet, like, you could go back to his timeline, take a screenshot, you can share it, even if, on Top Shot, if you can find that same, you may own, a Michael Jordan dunk, or LeBron dunk, but you can still find that on YouTube. You own that thing, but you don't necessarily own reproduction rights. Like if someone took a screenshot, like, so it's very different than if I have the original, like when I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like, you see like the original music, that was written, by hand by the different folks, or, if you have an original Vermeer, like, you own that, like no one else can kind of take a picture of that and then share it. But here, because many of these things are more like digital artifacts rather than physical properties, the owning of it is, I think, Andy, you talked about, it's just bragging rights. Like, yes, I own it, but I don't really control it in the same way that you would a physical.
I've heard some good phrases around this. It's more like proof of fandom is a good one. Proof of fandom. Or and I'd like to, before I forget, I want to give my chicken analogy for the podcast, which is like, let's say you have some chickens, and the chicken lays an egg. Who owns that egg? Is it the chicken, or does the owner of the chicken own the egg? I mean, let's say the owner of so who owns the chicken? Well, the owner of the chicken is the person who pays the money to support that chicken. So they pay for the food, they pay to keep the chicken healthy, to clean out the coop. They do the work to clean out the coop, which we just did the other day on Passover, which is a whole other podcast. But so anybody could eat that egg, but you own it. So that kind of works, I think, for the purposes of this episode. But I heard a great Winkleman, he had a
people with a B.
He had a great, he said anybody can take a picture of the Mona Lisa, but that doesn't mean that you own the Mona Lisa. So I think that, but the question is, what does owning it really get you? So is it a speculative investment, or is it just a status symbol for cryptocurrency millionaires to have bragging rights? Right.
Yeah. I think, I mean, to a large extent, it's the latter. because the value ascribed to something is only the value that the next person agrees with you that it has. So if they're, again, if I had like, it doesn't matter if it's just regular artwork of any artist. It's more valuable if more people know about it and more people find it to be of value to them, because that's what drives the pricing for it. It's, if I created an NFT of like one of the pictures that my daughter drew when she was in kindergarten, fairly sure that doesn't necessarily drive up the value because it's now an NFT of that image. I mean, for some people it might, but maybe one day she'll be super famous and it'll be super valuable. So but I think that there's a lot of eye of the beholder with this, especially as it relates to collectibles and art and music and some of the things that it's being used most for these days.
So here's what I get and what I don't get. So I can understand the idea of buying Jack Dorsey's first tweet or an Elon Musk tweet and being somehow associated with that. And everybody accepts this idea that you own it, whatever that means. Everybody says, okay, well, that's the system we're going with. You own it and you are allowed to collect value for it and it's allowed to appreciate. You can resell it and so forth. What I don't understand are some of these really weird sites, CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties. So CryptoPunks, if it's at larvalabs.com, they are selling these little kind of headshot, like 8-bit headshot drawings. It's maybe like 800 pixels or something. And the first one sold is now it's at $7.6 million. I don't know. This just makes me feel really old. That's all that's doing.
Let me give my take on this. Is that you basically are exerting ownership over a thing before the way in which you can enjoy that ownership has been invented.
Yeah.
Like
right.
If you can imagine these, well, I guess they're bitmaps, right?
Yeah, little bitmaps.
Imagine a game in the future that everyone's playing, and you want to use that bitmap as a cape that you wear around in the game. And supposing this game is built around using these NFTs as decorations on your avatar, right? Then well, now I own this. I can use that as my cape as I wander around in this virtual landscape on this game that was built upon it. So that's an example of something that in the future would allow you to actually enjoy the ownership of that bitmap, where no one else could use that,
Which is a big maybe. It's all maybe, right? It's just.
I'm just trying to imagine what under what circumstance would I say, oh, thank God I own that.
Thank God I paid $7 million.
Yeah, but that's like any other type of art.
Have you
it's
looked
like
at these?
If there's a group of people.
I'm going to share my screen,
but
maybe I should put this up on YouTube or something. Is that sharing?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I wouldn't pay a nickel for any of this stuff, but
so
that's okay.
Here's your top sale. Number one, this is the $7.6 million. That apparently, I guess it was either the first one made March 11th. It must have been the first one made. Or without hat and pipe, just as valuable. I mean, I don't, took somebody 5 seconds to redraw it, and change out those 30 pixels.
I mean, personally, I like either 4, 5, or 9 because I like monkeys.
So the speculation is, well, here's something new, and this is the first one, so this must have the most value, just like a first edition of a book or a first release of a record or something, right? I mean, if any of these are going to have value, it's going to be this first run. But
yeah, I'm having a hard time imagining a future where I regret ignoring this trend.
right.
But this is as close as I can get to it, where there's a platform wherein on that platform, all of the NFT ownership is respected, and the only way in which you can have a presence and identify yourself on this platform and have some notoriety is by owning NFTs of either your creation or someone else's creations. And then I will probably wish that I had bought some of this stuff early.
But
I can't imagine
guy.
It has to be better. It would have to be a fancier picture at least.
Yeah. So 254 punks have this. 317 punks have a pipe. They have a cap. 378 have the shades. I mean, currently owned by address. This address not listed for sale. So no bids. Somebody bids 7,000. I don't know. I don't get it. Oh, that's the initial, and then it goes. No, I'm really not sure what this is, but there's a 7.
Yeah, wait, scroll to the bottom for a second.
Sold right here.
Yeah, but scroll to the bottom, because the first offer was $128
right.
back in 2017.
Oh,
so so this does show that, first there was one person on the platform, and then there was a couple other people, and the value some inexplicably grew to $7.5 million. I mean, I would never,
21.
pay that much money for something like this. But it's
I don't understand this one.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Somebody offered $21 million. They didn't win though. It's very strange. Anyway,
might have been bogus.
Yeah.
So there's also an idea of rarity, right? And it is kind of tied up into this, which is so interesting because ultimately we're just talking about a collection of zeros and ones. I mean, so that sequence of zeros and ones is I have the only one of that.
I would think they're all equally rare, as in there's just the one sequence that is that sequence. That's kind of how sequences work.
Yeah, but in this case, this is like having a signed original, the original Mona Lisa versus having one of the 8 billion lithographs or the T-shirt of the Mona Lisa. You sort of have the Mona Lisa if it's on your T-shirt, but you don't have the Mona Lisa.
And I think that's the difference. You get to touch the Mona Lisa. You get to touch it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But this is
so. And be with it. People like that.
You could print it out. You could print it out and replace.
I think it's only a reasonable example if you don't actually care about touching the Mona Lisa. Like, I probably don't actually care about touching the Mona Lisa. So for me, that's a good example. But there's people who would say that's a terrible example. I would pay a lot to be able to touch this work of art whenever I feel like it.
It seems like if the one thing you can say about this is that there's a hump of fame that's required. You can't like Glenn, like you were saying, you can't just take a drawing that your kid made and put it up there. But you could take a photograph of a Banksy and put it up there and sell it, even if you're not Banksy, which apparently somebody did, because a couple of weeks ago I was looking at what claimed to be a Banksy account on OpenSea.io, which is now gone. So that just, plays into this whole idea of forgeries and so forth, and the problem there. But it seems like this hump of fame is the major. You have to get the fame before you can make any money off of this at all. But I'm wondering if one other thing. I'm just wondering if the youth today are so anti stuff. We don't have nobody wants DVDs anymore. Everybody's got electronic books, and Vinyl somehow made a comeback, but other than that, everything exists now in the digital realm. And if there's maybe there's some like innate need for ownership and for this kind of collecting, and this is how people have figured out a way to capitalize on that human need for status and so forth.
I mean, I do think it opens up a lot for creators to take control. And like one of the things that I've read,
Rich creators,
when it comes to music,
or famous
but
creators.
you don't even have to be, or soon to be famous creators. Like right now, discovery and streaming of music is very different than it used to be. You don't have to walk into the record store and have that distribution and have someone, press it for you and create the album artwork and all that stuff. But the way that the the record labels still work like it was 1962, and a lot of artists don't actually own the work that they wrote and created and performed. So it does, this could potentially allow someone, and it's be a lot easier for the Taylor Swifts of the world than some unknown, to publish their music as an NFT. They have full rights. They can then license it and now use, it's easier to kind of track that. Spotify is only playing from the NFT copy sort of, and that they're getting paid for that. And they don't need, because now the ownership of that is mine. Or, in this case, hers. And, it's easy to kind of trace that ownership, and then she can put whatever contract layer on top of it to say that every time this gets played, I get paid, such and such amount. And she could always sell those rights to that NFT, but then she has control of that. And then she can even sell that right to somebody. And then if they resell it, she can still get more money. So it's like I think that there's a lot that can break, existing business models. I think that the deed to your house type of thing, can be broken, in that way. I think that there's the potential for a lot of change into how, business gets done, by using this. I think that right now it's just happening first in the, entertainment, art, and creative world. And so it doesn't, it may be a little bit harder for, companies to figure out, what can I do with this?
Do you have any ideas? How can companies leverage this stuff? Like, what kind of assets would they be selling? Software?
We're gonna have to edit this part because I don't have an answer right now. I mean, I'll have to come back and come up with something.
Either.
But that's kind of the interesting part of this. I do think that it has to get past just collectibles of some sort. I mean, you can even look at the way that the NBA is doing this with Top Shots from a business perspective. They're creating money out of thin air for the ownership of these moments, for which the NBA still has all rights to use and to distribute and to get paid for. But there's this whole new business sprouting up around, existing assets that are theirs. So, it'll be interesting to, kind of see, how it evolves over time. But
yeah, I feel like right now there's still a baseline of desirability being a major factor, and whether that desirability is generated by something that makes sense, like the Twitter CEO first tweet, like that makes a lot of sense why that would have value to it, versus cyberpunk CryptoPunk thing, which I absolutely don't understand. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, potentially like this could, I don't know, I'm gonna say something probably stupid, but you know, like anything that has a certificate of authenticity around it could be and probably should be replaced by this. And I can see also like for certain, you know, very high cost goods, I think of diamonds, you know, as one example that also I know has a certificate of authenticity. You can use the blockchain to track every step of the way from the diamond mine to someone's finger of that, and then have that almost become an NFT like from the get go.
sure.
You know, again, maybe not, because it's also a diamond, you know, is fungible because you can fractionalize that by breaking one giant diamond into a whole lot of little diamonds. So I don't, that may not be the greatest example I've ever come up with, but yeah, I in that way, I can see that you are creating a unique item and some way to kind of track that uniqueness. It's a title, it's a deed of some sort. It's a proof of authenticity of it's the original.
So let's wrap up. What do you think? Where do you see this going? I mean, we didn't even talk about BitClout, which is a Bitcoin driven social network, which is maybe a little different, but
I think
you think that
BitClout's the example of a platform at which you would use these FTPs, I mean NFTs, not file transfer protocol, that you would use NFTs on that platform. That's what it's trying to be, I think.
yeah, I don't quite understand. I tried to sign up for it and then I got kind of blocked up at the part where you have to install the MetaMask and all that. And there's another one which is for writers called Mirror, and that a similar thing, except you have to join it, you have to pay a certain amount of Bitcoin, and it came out to about 120 bucks in Bitcoin just to get to become a writer on the network.
And
So
that's a one-way trip for your Bitcoin.
it seems to seem like a one-way trip to me. But what do you think? Do you think that this is going to be like more formalized over time? Do you think, like you said, Andy, they'll become greater mechanisms for validating and so forth, or do you think we'll just start to realize the risks of it more, and then things will just fall apart and people will lose favor in it?
I think these are all great proofs of concepts, right? And there's a lot of value in the notoriety of each of these things, and being in early is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of excitement, which is great. But in order for it to be at all useful for its claimed purpose of rewarding creators, and doing that in a way which is distributed, you're not reliant on some, say, record label or the NBA or Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey. In order to do this in a way that is the ideal, it would have to be built on top of Bitcoin or some other blockchain that would supplant Bitcoin. But at the moment, that we haven't seen evidence of that happening. So at some point, a thing will be built on top of Bitcoin to do all this, and it will probably also be built on top of an exchange layer where you would actually be able to make use of all these other proofs of ownership. So I think in the future, this potential to wish you had owned this stuff. So maybe buy into it at a reasonable amount. But the idea that you're going to spend, somebody ought to spend millions of dollars on one of these is really just not. I mean, that there's your tulip mania right there. That's That seems a bit much. But that's my take.
As Steve Jobs would say, I can't wait to see what you do with it. Yeah, it's like, I do think that this opens up a lot of potential. I do think there is definitely going to be more of marketplaces for certain things, and who's going to create the Pinterest of discovering some of NFTs and things like that.
I think OpenSea is already kind of that thing, isn't it?
Could be, but it'll just be interesting to see, other than this creative stuff, what kinds of goods, what kinds of processes will lend itself to the NFT. I do think that having this service layer of like the smart contracts to govern some of this, gives even if those things are still not quite fully baked and are being formalized, gives a good foundation for how businesses can look at it, but at using the technology. But I do think that there's potential for disrupting a lot of the way that things work today, and removing some of the central authorities for certain things, which is I think a lot of why people invented Bitcoin and distributed ledger in the first place. It's so we'll see.
We'll see. Well, I think I'm going to maybe look into turning this episode into an NFT.
I think that would be an excellent experiment. Yeah, and then we can have another episode wherein you talk about your experience of that, and then you can turn that into an NFT. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's actually not unlike, I forget the name of the writer for the Times, but he wrote an article about, NFTs, and he turned it into an NFT. And I think he sold it for like $680,000 or something stupid like that. But then gave the money to some sort of charity. So
that's nice.
He's a nice person.
We could break it up. You want the first minute of the podcast? Or the second minute?
Well, we'll create moments just like Top Shot.
Yeah. Oh, hey, you know what I wanted to mention? Do you guys remember back in like the 90s, I think, there was a website that sold pixels on the website. Do you guys remember that?
I remember that.
This is like the same thing, kind of, except you can resell and so forth. But that was kind of the same concept. Like every pixel you could roll over it and it would tell you like who owned it or something. I remember who had bought it.
And then you got to pick the data in that pixel.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could buy like a group of pixels. You could put something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can put your logo in there.
Yeah.
Must have been a Boston thing. I have no recollection of this at all.
Well, that's very surprising. All right. Well, guys, thanks a lot. This was an awesome conversation. I like where it went. It's really good.
Awesome. Thanks for including me. This was fun.
Of course. Yeah, you're the only guy that knows anything. So.
I imagine things.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Take
See
care.
You guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thanks for joining us on this episode of the Modern Digital Enterprise, the digital transformation podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet podcast network.
As a leading technology consultancy and reseller, Anexinet helps clients provide a complete digital experience for customers, employees, and end users. We accomplish this through our holistic approach, which encompasses all aspects of today's digital journey, end to end. Anexinet partners with top technology vendors like HPE to offer products and services that enhance the digital experience across customer engagement, enterprise mobility, cloud and hybrid IT, and analytics. Because great digital experiences rely on the smooth operation of all interconnected elements. From strategy through execution, we deliver custom multi-channel applications, including web, mobile, chat, and voice. With self-service apps for customer loyalty and enterprise apps that streamline internal processes, now you can reimagine legacy applications to propel your business forward. Anexinet also helps you embrace modern cloud and hybrid IT infrastructure to provide a seamless experience at every touchpoint, empowering you to recover quickly from disaster scale to meet demand, and automate systems for perfect performance 24/7. And to maximize your competitive advantage, we ensure you always deliver the best experience possible by continuously honing your digital solutions through data-driven insights. So, how do you know if your business has what it takes to provide the complete digital experience? One that sets you apart, maintains competitive edge, and turns users into passionate fans? Simple. Just give us a call. Together, we can deepen engagement and make every digital experience remarkable.